In downtown Tampa in 2015, a man named John Hilinski couldn't fall asleep. Barely sheltered under a pile of cardboard boxes, Hilinski couldn't ignore the noise of the city buses as they roared past. Anyone who walked past the cardboard boxes was probably completely unaware that Hilinski was even there. It was a meager existence, true, but at that moment, Hilinski's life was on the verge of changing forever. Cops approached a homeless man with a crucial piece of information about his past. Interestingly, Hilinski was born in Poland before moving to the US. Unfortunately, the American dream wasn't easily attainable for the immigrant. In about 2012, Hilinski wound up on the streets of Tampa, Florida, when all his personal identification records were stolen from him. The streets became his home for approximately 3 years. Tampa, of course, is famous for its sandy white beaches and popular tourist attractions. Hilinski didn't have the cushy tourist experience, however. With no way of proving his identity, it was tough for Hilinski to even land a spot in a homeless shelter. He was forced to fend for himself as best he could on the streets. "I just managed on my own. I remember having a cardboard box and sleeping by the bus stop," he told ABC Action News. Heartbreakingly, he added, "I'd be underneath the benches there and no one would see me." To the wider world, Hilinski was more or less invisible. Of course, without any sort of identification, it was all too easy for Hilinski to fall through the cracks of the system. A further complication was the fact that he had been born outside the US, making his identity even harder to verify. It was difficult enough to find a bed for the night and a hot meal to fill his stomach. The dream of having a home of his own and rebuilding a life for himself from nothing must have seemed well beyond reach for Hilinski. His cause must have seemed all but lost. But one day, everything started to turn around for the homeless 62-year-old. It all started when Hilinski decided to try and find a bed at the Community Housing Solutions Center in the Hillsborough County area of Tampa. The hostel, known as DACO, was to play a big part in turning his life around. DACO provides accommodation for homeless men and women. Its mission upon opening in 2015, according to Tampa Hillsborough Homeless Initiative's Chief Executive Officer Antoinette Triplett, was to reduce the number of people who experience homelessness and also the length of time people experience homelessness. At DACO, a caseworker was assigned to look into Hilinski's situation. And luckily for him, his new helper wasn't one to back down from a challenge. The man in question, Charles Inman, explained to ABC Action News he needed to have an identification, but we couldn't get an identification without a birth certificate. In the face of what could have been an infuriating catch-22 situation, Inman was resolute. "There was no other option but to succeed," he said in a report. "You know, the thought of putting a 62-year-old man back on the street wasn't acceptable," the Daily Mail also reported him as saying. And the lifeline that was offered to Hilinski got even stronger. Inman enlisted Tampa police officer Dan McDonald to assist him in the search for Hilinski's identification. He too wasn't about to take a lack of documentation lying down. "I like a challenge," he said in the ABC Action News report. Even though Hilinski had been born in Poland, he was a US citizen. "First we had to figure out that we needed a consular record," McDonald explained. When that had been tracked down, the two guardian angels were able to get him a driver's license and a social security card. Hilinski was no doubt delighted to be able to prove his identity again. He had been taken out of the shadows and back into society. He went beyond the call of duty, he said of Inman to ABC Action News, and the sentiment could equally apply to McDonald, too. But the duo then discovered something that shocked them all. Incredibly, Hilinski possessed a forgotten bank account, which he had set up at a Tampa bank. Over the years, the bank had changed its name. It was Landmark Bank, and then it became Bank of America, Hilinski explained to ABC Action News. Because of the name change, the account had somehow slipped Hilinski's mind. Perhaps there hadn't been much money in it to start with, so it didn't stand out as something worth chasing up when the original bank seemed to disappear. However, as an American citizen, Hilinski had been entitled to Social Security benefits. These had been piling up for years in the account, forgotten and unspent. And when the team finally tracked the cash down, it had grown into an undisclosed but tidy nest egg. "I think we were both stunned, not quite sure what to say," Officer McDonald told ABC Action News. And they certainly had reason to be. For the amount, although not a king's ransom, was enough to provide Hilinski some secure housing for the first time in quite a while. "I guess I'm excited, you know," Hilinski told ABC Action News back in 2015. Certainly he had every reason to be, for now he had enough to make the dream of having a place of his own a reality. His first thought was to put a deposit down on a small apartment. Whatever Helinski's future held from that moment on, it would surely have seemed a lot sunnier than when he contemplated life in a cardboard box by a bus stop. A remarkable stroke of good fortune had turned his life around, though it really shouldn't be luck that makes the difference between a warm bed and a cardboard box. In Helinski's case, it was the kindness of people who dedicated their lives to serving the public, every member of the public, that lifted him out of poverty. Some people in the throes of poverty don't have help at all, however. They have to make tough choices in order to survive, choices that some may see as immoral. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.